Stuka Joe here. Today we're going to take a look at the Shores of Tripoli. This is a game designed by Kevin Bertram and published by Fort Circle Games. It is a two-player card-driven strategy game about the war between the United States and the Barbary states of North Africa from 1801 to 1806. Let's take a look now at the components. The game includes a 16 by 34 inch mounted map board showing the north coast of Africa with harbors, patrol zones, spaces to place units that have not entered the game, and turn record track. There are wooden pieces representing the frigates and gunboats of the United States, Swedish frigates, and also frigates and corsairs of Tripoli and Tripoli's allies. The game also includes 2 decks of cards, one for each of the players, and 3 additional Tropolitan cards that are used if you're playing the solitaire version of the game, where the player takes control of the US forces. The game includes 1 full-color rulebook, and as you can see, the rulebook is well illustrated and not very long. The rules of the game only cover 10 pages, and there's solitaire rules, and at the back you have a list of solitaire card play requirements. The game also includes a 12-page historical supplement with designer notes, and you have a summary of the history of the war from 1801 to 1805, and a section with designer notes, and of course the credits and the playtesters were just too many for me to fit in the video credits. And the game also includes a copy in glossy paper of the letter that Thomas Jefferson sent to Yusuf Karamanli, the Pasha and Bey of Tripoli, on May 21st, 1801. It also includes 24 dice, 8 yellow, 8 blue, and 8 red. And also 12 round gold pieces that represent merchant ships captured by the Tropolitan player. So how is this game won or lost? Let's take a look first at the ways that the Tropolitan player can win the game. One way for the Tropolitan player to win is by making the war costly to the United States, and that is represented in the game if 4 of the 8 US frigates in the game are sunk. When that happens, the Tropolitan player immediately wins. The Tropolitan player has a number of corsairs, represented by these small wooden ship counters, and of course corsairs engage in piracy. Another way that the Tropolitan player can win is by sinking merchant ships. Each time one merchant ship is sunk, 1 gold coin is added to the Tropolitan treasure, and once 12 gold coins are accumulated, the Tropolitan player wins. There are also infantry units represented in this game by cubes, and the blue and white cubes is the American and Arab army of Hamet Karamanli. Hamet Karamanli was the brother of Yusuf Karamanli, who is the person who was ruling Tripoli, and appears in the back of the Tropolitan cards. So the United States wants to install Hamet as the ruler of Tripoli, and another way that the Tropolitan player can win is by eliminating Hamet's army. Now, Hamet's army does not enter the game until at least the spring of 1804, and it enters by playing one of the US's core cards, but we'll get into the cards later on. Here you see the turn record track. It begins in 1801, so each turn in this game is composed of 4 seasonal phases where cards are played: spring, summer, fall, and winter. So Hamet's army will enter the game in the spring of 1804. So that is well in the middle of the duration of the game. To win by capturing Tripoli, the American player has to first play this card, Assault on Tripoli. And this card is playable only in the fall of 1805 or later. Once the card is played, the American player moves all American frigates and gunboats to the harbor of Tripoli, and Hamed's army from Benghazi, which you see there on the right, to Tripoli. And the American player, if he has it available, can then play the Send in the Marines card. And this card provides 3 Marine infantry units to the city of Tripoli for the attack. And then the assault on Tripoli is resolved, and if the Americans win the assault, they win the game. The second way in which the American player can win is by successfully playing this card, the Treaty of Peace and Amity. And this card is playable if all the following 4 conditions are met. It has to be first the fall of 1805 or later, and the cities of Algiers, Tangier, and Tunis are all at peace. Here we see from left to right Tangier, Algiers, and Tunis. These are potential allies of the Tropolitan player, and they have to be all at peace when the Treaty of Peace and Amity is played. The third requirement is that the city of Dern has been captured. Here you see the city of Dern, located between Alexandria and Benghazi. Hamed's army can enter the game as early as the spring turn of 1804, and it enters in Alexandria. So it has to at least occupy Dern for that third requirement to be met. And the fourth requirement is that there be no Tropolitan frigates in the harbor of Tripoli. The Tropolitan player starts with corsairs and infantry units on the board. It can receive frigates by the play of event cards. So that's the second way in which the US player can win. If none of the players achieve any of their victory conditions, then the game ends as a draw. The game starts in the spring phase of 1801 and can last up to and including the winter phase of 1806. Let's take a look at the game setup. At the beginning of the game, the US player starts with 3 frigates in Gibraltar, where there's also 2 corsairs. And in Gibraltar is the only space in which none of the belligerents can enter into combat. It is a kind of a neutral zone. The Tropolitan player, on the other hand, has 4 corsairs and 4 infantry units in Tripoli. There are 3 US frigates that enter the game as reinforcements at the beginning of each of the 1802, 1803, and 1804 turns. However, there is an early deployment event card that allows the American player to take 1 American frigate from the following year of the year and turn track and place it on the map board in any naval patrol zone. Naval patrol zones are these light blue semicircular areas, and the purpose of these zones is for the American player to intercept any piracy attempts by the corsair units. So let's say that the Tropolitan player plays a card to conduct a pirate raid in the open sea, which is this dark blue area here. Having frigates on patrol allows the American player to attempt to intercept and sink corsair units before they arrive at the open sea. In this card-driven game, a player can play a card so that the event takes place, or a player can discard a card for one of 2 possible effects. The American player can discard a card in order to move up to 2 frigates. And frigates can be moved to a patrol zone, in which case they will be able to attempt to intercept corsairs that will attempt to engage in piracy. or frigates can be moved into harbors containing corsair units, in which case there will be a round of naval combat. The U.S. player can also discard a card in order to build a gunboat, which he takes from the United States supply and places it in Malta. The Tropolitan player, on the other hand, can discard a card to build a corsair, which he places in Tripoli. Or he can discard a card to conduct a pirate raid with the corsairs from Tripoli, in which case, if they are not intercepted by American or Swedish frigates in the patrol zone, then they will conduct a pirate raid, each corsair rolling 1d6, and for each result of 5 or 6, the corsair is assumed to have sunk a merchant ship, which are represented in the game by the gold coins, and 12 gold coins will give the Tropolitan player a victory. So we've seen that each player can play a card for its event or for one of two other specific purposes, which are unique to his or her side. Now there's different kinds of cards in this game. Each side has a set of 3 core cards, and these cards are available at all times during the game, and you can play one of these cards instead of playing a card from your hand. Let's take a look at the American core cards. The Americans have the Hamet's Army Created core card, which is playable on or after the spring of 1804. It brings 1 American frigate to the harbor of Alexandria, and Hamet's army, which consists at the beginning of the game of 1 Marine, that's a blue cube, and 5 Arab infantry units, those are the white cubes. And then there's the Thomas Jefferson core card. This allows the American player to move at once up to 8 American frigates and resolve any battles that result. The last American core card is the Swedish Frigates Arrive card. Play of this card places 2 Swedish frigates, which are these 2 yellow frigates that begin in the United States supply, in the naval patrol zone of Tripoli. And as stated in the bottom of these cards, after you play a core card for its event, it is permanently removed from the game. Now let's take a look at the Tropolitan core cards. The first core card is Constantinople Sends Aid, and this is playable only if Hamet's army has captured Dern. And if such is the case as shown here, the Tropolitan player adds 1 frigate, 2 corsairs, and 2 infantry units to Tripoli. The next Tropolitan core card is Murad Race Breaks Out. And with this card, the Tropolitan player can move the 2 Tropolitan corsairs from the harbor of Gibraltar. And these are the 2 corsairs that start the game there, to the harbor of Tripoli. And if there's any American frigates in the patrol zone for Tripoli, they could conduct an interception roll. And the last core card for the Tropolitans is the Yusuf Karamanli card. And this card allows the player to conduct a pirate raid with the corsairs from the harbor of Tripoli, together with the corsairs from the harbors of each of their active allies. So let's say that in this example, Tunisia is an ally. Algeria hasn't been activated, but Morocco has. In that case, the Tropolitan player could conduct pirate raids using his corsairs from Tripoli, plus those from Tunis and Tangier. And those are the core cards for the Tropolitans. And what we'll be doing is playing a few turns of the game to give you an idea of the flow of the game. And the game is already set up. But let's take a look at the initial positions and forces of each side. At the beginning of the game, the Americans have 3 frigates in Gibraltar, and the Tropolitans have 2 corsairs there, and the only way those corsairs can move elsewhere is through the play of an event card. And at the beginning of the game, Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia are not active allies of the Tropolitans. Their activation happens with the play of an event card. Malta is a port or a harbor that is friendly to the Americans, and the Americans place their newly built gunboats there. Alexandria is the other friendly harbor and city for the Americans, but it does not come into relevance until 1804, when Hamed's army is deployed there and starts marching towards Tripoli. The Tropolitans begin with 2 infantry units in Benghazi and 2 in Dern, as well as 4 infantry units and 4 corsairs in Tripoli. And the remaining units for both sides are placed in their respective supply boxes. Place the turn marker in the 1801 space, and we place the phase or season marker in the spring space. And at the start of each turn from 1801 to 1804, each player is dealt 6 cards from their decks. So we deal the American player 6 cards. And we also deal 6 cards to the Tropolitan player. So we start with the spring round, and in each round consists first of an American play, then a Tropolitan play, and then the end of season. Let's take a look at the American cards. We have here the Preble's Boys Take Aim card, and you see in the bottom it has 2 swords. This is a battle card, and the event can only be used during a battle. So unless there's a battle during this round, this card cannot be played. And we see here that we have another battle card, the Daring Stephen Decatur. Same situation, it's a battle card. We have also Lieutenant O'Bannon Leads the Charge, a 3rd battle card. Here we have a card that does not have any such symbol. Bainbridge Supplies Intel allows us to take a card from the American discard pile, which we haven't started yet, and either place it in hand or play it immediately. And then we have the Naval Movement card, which allows us to move 4 American frigates instead of 2 if we discard 1 card. And the ever-important Assault on Tripoli card, but this card is important in 1805, in the fall of 1805 or later. Right now we can play it for, not play it, but discard it in order to move frigates or bring gunboats to Malta. So this is the first American play, but what we will be doing is playing one of our core cards. We will play the Swedish Frigates Arrive card, and of course, because we're playing it for the event, and it has this symbol there, this core symbol, it will be eliminated permanently from the game. But this card allows us to place 2 Swedish frigates in the naval patrol zone of Tripoli, which will allow us to intercept any corsairs that want to make quick money by raiding while we still haven't deployed our forces fully. We take both Swedish frigates and we place them in the patrol zone around Tripoli. And this card is permanently removed from the game. Let's take a look at the Tropolitan hand. The first card that we see here is Sweden Pays Tribute, which is only playable if it's 1803 or later, and this causes both Swedish frigates to withdraw from the naval patrol zone in Tripoli, and the Tropolitans would earn 2 gold coins, but this is not playable now for the event. Algiers Declares War. This is a possibility, and this would place 3 Algerine corsairs in the harbor of Algiers. Tunisian Corsairs raid. This allows us to conduct a raid with the Tunisian Corsairs, but Tunisia has not entered the war yet, so this card is not playable for the event at this time. This is an interesting card. The Philadelphia runs aground. The Philadelphia, an American frigate, can potentially be converted into a Tropolitan frigate. But to play this card, there has to be at least one American frigate in the patrol zone in Tripoli, and that's not the case at this time. The frigates there are Swedish. Merchant ship converted. This can be played only after a successful Tropolitan pirate raid, and it adds one Corsair to the harbor in Tripoli. Tripoli acquires Corsair. We would place 2 Tropolitan Corsairs in the harbor of Tripoli. So those are the cards. Let's see which one the Tropolitans play. The Tropolitans play this card, Algiers Declares War, for the event. So we place 3 Algerine Corsairs in the harbor of Algiers. Now remember, in order for these Corsairs to actually conduct raids, we have to play the corresponding event card. And this card, having been played for its event, and it's a unique event, it is now removed permanently from the game. So it's the end of season segment, which simply means that we move it to the next season, summer. We'll discard this card, Assault on Tripoli, which is a crucial victory card, but it's not applicable in 1801, only from the fall of 1805 onwards. So the Americans discard this card, replace it next to the draw pile to form a discard pile, in order to bring a gunboat to Malta. What's the importance of gunboats? Well, they bombard with a die roll, 1 die, and they can also engage in combat with Corsairs rolling 1 die. They absorb 1 hit and they are sunk, but also they're important in order to absorb losses that otherwise would be suffered by the frigates. In this game, if you lose 4 frigates as the American player, you lose the game. So now we go to Tropolitan play, and the Tropolitans play this card. Tripoli acquires Corsairs for the event, so we place 2 Tropolitan Corsairs in the harbor in Tripoli, and now there's 6. And the card, because it was played for its event and it is a unique event, it is permanently removed from the game. Now we move on to the fall season of 1801. The Americans will discard this card. Lieutenant O'Bannon leads the charge. The reason to discard it is that it is only playable at the start of a land battle, and there's no land battle occurring during the near future. It was placed in the discard pile because it was not played for its event, in order to move 2 frigates. And the first frigate will move from Gibraltar to the patrol zone surrounding Algiers, and the second frigate will go into the patrol zone surrounding Tripoli. Move on to Tropolitan play, and they play this card. The Philadelphia runs aground, which is playable if there's at least 1 American frigate in the naval patrol zone of Tripoli. And there is. So now 1 die is rolled on a 1 or 2 minor damage, and the frigate goes to the harbor of Malta. 3 or 4, it is sunk. 5 or 6, it would be captured and substituted by a Tropolitan frigate. However, the Americans have 1 battle card that they can play in reaction, the Daring Stephen Decatur. And this card can be played if this is the active event, or the Launch the Intrepid is the active event. And in this instance, we roll 2 dice, and the Americans choose the preferred result. And the roll is a 1 and a 4, and the Americans choose the 1. So that means that it is minor damage, and we move the American frigate to the harbor of Malta. And both these cards were played for their events, so they are permanently removed from the game. Now we move on to the winter season of 1801. And the Americans will play this card. Naval movement allows them to move up to 4 American frigates. There's only 3 on the board right now. Americans move their frigate in Malta and the one in Gibraltar, as well as the frigate in the patrol zone around Algiers, into the harbor of Tripoli, and we will have naval combat. And any American gunboats in Malta may join the battle, and the lone gunboat in Malta this time does join the battle. Notice that the Swedish frigates cannot join and participate in the attack. And we begin by announcing if any battle cards will be played, and the Americans announce first, and they will play Preble's Boys Take Aim. This is playable during a naval battle in a harbor, which is the case here, and each American frigate may roll 3 dice instead of 2. And the other sentence does not apply because we are not playing it during the Assault on Tripoli event card. So the frigates will roll 3 dice instead of 2. Meanwhile, the Tropolitans don't have any battle card that is playable because the merchant ship converted card is only playable if a pirate raid has been successful, and the other cards are not battle cards. So we roll 3 dice per frigate, so that's 9, plus 1 die for the American gunboat for a total of 10 dice. So we will roll 5 dice twice, so the first 5 dice are rolled and no 6s, only 6s hit. So now we roll the remaining 5 dice, and again, no hits. And in this game, hits are assessed simultaneously. So now we have to roll 6 dice for the Tropolitan Corsairs. And no 6s, so no hits in this sole combat round. And all surviving frigates and gunboats return to Malta. The naval movement card, which is not a unique event, is placed in the discard pile, and the battle card, which is a unique event and was played for the event, is permanently removed from the game. So we move on to Tropolitan play, and this card will be discarded. This card takes effect from 1803 onwards, and it'll take a while, so it will be discarded, will not be removed from the game, and it'll come back. So this card is discarded for the purpose of allowing the Corsairs in Tripoli to conduct a raid. And we place the card here to form the Tropolitan discard pile. To conduct the raid, the Corsairs need to move to the open sea, so they have to cross the patrol zone in order to reach the open sea. That means that the Swedish frigates have a chance to intercept and sink some of the Corsairs. And the interception is conducted by the American player rolling 2 dice per Swedish frigate, and for each 6, 1 Corsair will be sunk. And 1 6 was rolled, so 1 Corsair is sunk, and the remaining 5 Corsairs make it to the open sea, where they can make die rolls now to determine if they are able to sink merchant ships. Each Corsair rolls 1d6, and on 5 or 6s, a merchant ship will be sunk. And the Corsairs managed to roll 2 6s. That means that 2 merchant ships were sunk, and these are represented by gold coins. So the Tropolitan player has 2 of 12 gold coins. 12 are needed to win the game, and the Corsairs return to the harbor at Tripoli. In this game, sunk Corsairs and U.S. gunboats are placed in their respective supply boxes. And that's the end of the winter phase of 1801, so now we move to the spring phase of 1802, and the Americans receive a frigate as a reinforcement. And the frigate is placed in the harbor of Gibraltar. Next, each of the players draws 6 cards, and the most they can hold in their hand is 8. The U.S. player had 1 card left from the previous turn, so we draw 6 cards. The Tropolitan player had 2 cards left from the previous turn, so we draw 6 cards also. Let's take a look at the American player's hand. This was the card left from the previous turn. Bainbridge supplies intel, which allows the American player to take a card from the discard pile and place it in his hand or play it immediately. The tribute paid card. Here, 1 American frigate is moved to the harbor of an active ally of Tripoli. Right now, the only active ally is Algeria, and all the corsairs there are returned to the supply, but the Tropolitan player receives 2 gold coins. Then we have Constantinople demands tribute. Here the Tropolitan player has to return 2 gold coins to the supply. The Send in the Marines card. This is a combat card playable only during the assault on Tripoli. So this battle card can only be played if we're playing the assault on Tripoli event card. And then we have the Treaty of Peace and Amity card, which we saw before, which will not be able to be played during this turn because it can only be played from the fall of 1805 onward. So it can be discarded for an effect. Lieutenant Sterrett in Pursuit, another battle card that can be played when making an interception roll. A Show of Force. This card allows the American player to move 3 frigates to the harbor of an active ally of Tripoli, and it returns all the corsairs from that harbor to the supply. And finally, the card that was left from the previous turn. Let's take a look at the Tropolitan player's card. This card, Merchant Ship Converted, was left from the previous turn, and it can only be played during a Tropolitan pirate raid. This other card was also left from the previous turn, Tunisian Corsairs raid, but the Tunisian Corsairs have not declared war yet. Of the new cards, we have this one, Storm. This card allows the Tropolitan player to select a naval patrol zone containing at least an American frigate. You roll a die for each frigate. The first 6 rolled sinks a frigate, and the second 6 rolled damages a frigate. And it would be placed on the following year on the year turn track. Then we have the U.S. Signals Books Overboard card. This card is playable after an interception roll is made. So this is a battle card. The Tripoli Attacks card. This card allows the Tropolitan player to move all frigates and corsairs from the harbor of Tripoli to the naval patrol zone of Tripoli and resolve battle against the American frigates in the patrol zone, and the Swedish frigates are ignored. They don't participate in the battle. And here we have the Morocco Declares War card. And that would enter 3 Moroccan corsairs in Tangier. And the Tunis Declares War card, and it does the same. 3 Tunisian corsairs in the harbor of Tunis. And then we have the U.S. Supplies Run Low card, which forces 1 American frigate to be moved from a naval patrol zone to the harbor of Malta. So these are the cards in the hand of the Tropolitan player. So we begin with the spring phase of the 1802 turn and American play. And the Americans play this card, A Show of Force. So the Americans will move 3 American frigates to the harbor of an active ally of Tripoli, and in this case it will be Algeria, and that will force the return of all the corsairs in the harbor of Algiers to the supply. So the frigate in Gibraltar moves to the harbor of Algiers, as well as 2 frigates that are presently in Malta. They will also be moving there. And now, with that movement, the corsairs that are in Algiers are moved to the supply. So that means for now, there's no corsairs for any ally of the Tripolitanians on the map. And notice this is not a unique event card, so it can be played for its event and it goes back into the discard pile. And when the discards are shuffled back into the draw deck, that card can be played once again. Now we go to the Tropolitan play step, and they play this card for the event Tunis Declares War. So we place 3 Tunisian corsairs in the harbor of Tunis. And the Tropolitans have the card to make these raiders go out and commit acts of piracy. They just have to play it later. And this card, it was played for its event. It's a unique event, so it is removed permanently from the game. Now we move on to the summer phase of 1802. Now the Americans play the Bainbridge Supplies Intel card, which allows the Americans to take any card from the American discard pile and either place it in the American hand or play it immediately. And the Americans will take the A Show of Force card that we saw they played in the previous round to move 3 American frigates to the harbor of an active ally of Tripoli. So the 3 frigates in Algiers now move to Tunis. And as stated in the card, we return all of the corsairs from the harbor to the supply. So those Tunisian corsairs were short-lived for now. And notice that both of these cards are not unique events, so their play as event cards does not remove them from the game. So we place both of them in the discard pile and they may return later in the game. So the Tropolitan player now, and this card cannot be played for its event because the Tropolitan corsairs were removed from the game in a previous phase or round. But this card can be discarded in order to allow the corsairs in the harbor of Tripoli to conduct a pirate raid, and the only thing stopping them are the 2 Swedish frigates. So we first place the corsairs in the patrol zone and we resolve interception. There's 2 frigates, each frigate rolls 2 dice, and only on 6s will there be hits against the corsairs. So we roll 4 dice. 1 6 is rolled, so 1 corsair is sunk. And the remaining 4 corsairs make it to the open sea, where we will roll now 1 die per corsair, and on a 5 or 6, 1 merchant ship will be sunk. 2 5s were rolled, so the corsair raid produces 2 gold coins. So now we return the corsairs and the gold in the harbor at Tripoli, and now we can play this card. The Tropolitans play Merchant Ship Converted, playable if a Tropolitan pirate raid has just been successful. It has. And we place 1 Tropolitan corsair in the harbor of Tripoli. So 1 Tropolitan corsair is taken from the supply and placed in the harbor, where now the Tropolitans have a total of 5 corsairs. The Tunisian corsairs raid, which was discarded, goes to the discard pile, but the Merchant Ship Converted card, a unique event that was played as a battle card, is removed permanently from the game. Now we move to the fall phase. The American player plays this card. Constantinople demands tribute. The Tropolitan player must return 2 gold coins to the supply. And that leaves the Tropolitan player with 2 gold coins. And this card, not being a unique event, is placed in the discard pile. Now the Tropolitan player plays this card. Morocco declares war, and this causes that 3 Moroccan corsairs be placed in the harbor at Tangier. And the card is not permanently removed from the game, but placed in the discard pile. Now to the winter round of 1802. The American player plays this card, Tribute Paid. So one American frigate is moved to the harbor of an active ally of Tripoli. So one of the frigates currently in Tunis moves to the harbor at Tangier. And the other effect is to return all the corsairs from that harbor to the supply. But the Tropolitan player receives 2 gold coins. So the 3 corsairs in Tangier are returned to the supply, but the Tropolitans receive 2 more gold coins, and now they have 4. And this card, not being a unique event, is not eliminated or removed permanently from the game, but placed in the American discard pile. Now the Tropolitan player will play one of his core cards. Murad Reis breaks out. So now the Tropolitans can move the 2 corsairs that they have in the harbor of Gibraltar to the harbor of Tripoli. Any American frigates in the naval patrol zone of Gibraltar may first make an interception roll. But there are no American frigates in Gibraltar, so those 2 corsairs are placed in the harbor at Tripoli. So now the Tropolitans have a total of 7 corsairs in Tripoli harbor. And this core card, being used for its unique event, is now permanently removed from the game. And we've played 2 complete turns of the Shores of Tripoli, and that's where we will end this video here. This is a game that you can see both sides have very different goals, very different forces, and very different ways to approach their victory conditions. Being a card-driven game, and given the luck of the draw of the cards, not all games will be the same. So I hope that this video has given you a good idea of the flow of the game and what the game has to offer. This is Stuka Joe, signing off for now. Thanks for watching.